Okay, so welcome everybody and thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Marette and I'm one of the servants from St. Mark's Family's English service. If this is your first time with us, our service is dedicated to organising various events that are relevant to our families at St. Mark's in English. So this includes workshops and social gatherings, but obviously due to the current lockdown, we've moved most of our things to online seminars to discuss various topics that are relevant to families. So our last seminar was presented by Father Morris and it was on the topic of conflict in marriage. So he gave us some very practical advice on how to avoid and then how to also deal with with conflicts between husbands and wives. And so since then, we've received quite a lot of feedback about our last session, with many of you wanting us to continue to talk about issues in marriage. So it brings us to today's session on marriage, bridging the gap. So we'll discuss issues that break marriage, solutions, and how we can work towards achieving a Christian marriage rather than a secular one. We're very blessed this evening to have with us Kiro Saleeb. So Kiro is a psychotherapist and he's been working with partners in conflict for many years. He's currently the CEO of Exodus Youth Works, which is an organisation based on serving families, individuals and seniors in the community. Kiro is also the director and principal therapist at Theosis Counselling Consulting. So thank you, Kiro, for giving us your time tonight to help us with our questions and topic. We would like to have this particular seminar to be as interactive as possible. So please, if you want to pop your cameras on or put your hand up or write some questions, please, this is how it becomes real and this is how it becomes very practical and how we can really share from each other and learn together and grow together as, you know, Christian couples. And, you know, we're all in the same boat. We all experience very similar things. So it would be lovely for everybody to really get involved. We will only be recording the first part where Kiro will just be giving us a brief introduction and then recording will be off. So it's a chat. It's a friendly forum for all of us to talk together. What I was going to say is, and questions, please feel free to write them down or pop your hand up. And if we would like to please begin Abuna Elijah with a short prayer, that would be lovely.
Thank you, Marie. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We thank you so much, Lord, for allowing us this time to be in your presence. And we thank you, Lord, for your church, which is our safe haven, which is our ark in the midst of the storm, Lord, that we currently find ourselves in. We pray, Lord, that you give us, Lord, eyes of thankfulness, always, Lord, focusing on what we have and not what we lack. We pray, Lord, that you be with all of those who are struggling at this time. Be, Lord, with those who are sick. Be with those, Lord, who are caring for the sick. We beg, Lord, and pray that you be with all of the families, all of the children, all of those who live alone, of those who are suffering with their mental health. You know, Lord, the needs of each and every one of your people. We beg, Lord, that you extend your hand and that you support us, your children, during this time. We pray, Lord, that you bless this meeting, Lord, and that it may be pleasing to you and according to your will. We pray, Lord, that you make our hearts, Lord, ready to receive, ready to learn, ready, Lord, not just to accept theory, but real and true transformation, repentance, and change. We pray, Lord, that you forgive us, Lord, for our many sins. We pray, Lord, that you allow us, Lord, to reveal to us, Lord, our mistakes, humble us, Lord, and hear our prayers through the intercessions of St. Mary and St. Mark and all your angels and saints. Hear us as we pray thankfully, saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil through Jesus Christ our Lord. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Buna. So we will begin with Kiro's short talk and then we'll go straight to questions. So please, as we just said, please pop your hand up, raise your hand or write an anonymous question and we'll go from there. So the floor is yours, Kiro. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys. So I've been asked to talk about marriage, Christian marriage. And I thought we'd focus a little bit on what Christian marriage is. Compared to a secular marriage, so what it means for us as Christians. I'll go through four, they call them marriage killers, that's a bit dramatic, but I guess four things that really stand out in marriages that do experience sort of issues and difficulties. And then we'll talk about four Christian strategic solutions, I guess, to these problems, and to sort of help us have more Christian marriages. So I just want to start with a small disclaimer. So obviously everything we're going to talk about is quite general. They're concepts, they're theories. Every marriage is different. It's very, issues within marriages are very case by case scenario. So don't be disheartened, or don't feel like, you've done what we're talking about, and it's been unsuccessful and you're doomed and all of this kind of stuff. This is just theory, sort of general knowledge and information and concepts. Don't sort of apply it to your marriage and be disheartened, by what you're hearing. Again, the context of what I'm going to be talking about, it's very general. So I'm not talking about your relationships and marriages that are experiencing things like domestic violence, or if there's safety issues, or, quite severe mental illness and things like that. We're talking in general about marital conflict and marriage problems that we all experience in all our marriages, and conflict resolution skills and things like that. So it's quite general. And there are obviously circumstances where some of these strategies don't apply because we have safety and risk issues. And for the purpose of this talk, we're not talking about that. And I heard Abuna Morris's talk last time, and again, and I agree with him. If you guys are listening to certain things and you feel you've tried, or your situation's sort of a bit higher level than what we're talking about, obviously I'm a therapist, so I'm a big supporter of counselling and therapy. So definitely consult a professional if you need to. Speak to your parish priest, speak to someone you trust, and get the advice, and get some outside help if needed. So I definitely agree with Abuna on that. So to start off, and guys, please jump in if we can have it interactive. I'm no expert, and a lot of you have been married a lot longer than I have, and you have, first-hand experience. So please jump in, give your experiences, ask questions. Don't wait for me to stop talking. Just jump in. If it can be interactive, it'll be awesome. So Christian marriage compared to a secular marriage, and I guess Christian marriage for us, there's more to it, and it does differ than just a secular marriage or just a union between two people or a legal marriage. So for us, and I've got a definition here, Christian marriage is the union between a man and a woman, which is instituted and ordained by God. And that's the biggest difference between our marriages and secular ones. So a union between a man and a woman, it's instituted and ordained by God as the lifelong relationship between one man as husband and one woman as wife. So the definition is quite specific, and obviously God features in that definition and needs to feature in that definition for it to be considered a Christian marriage. And then we ask ourselves, then what sort of defines a successful Christian marriage? Is it things like is a successful marriage one that doesn't end in divorce? Is that how we define a good Christian marriage? Is it one where both parties love each other, or there's passion and romance, where fighting and conflict is minimal? We don't fight, we don't get angry at each other, we don't, swear and carry on. So we have a good Christian marriage. Is that what defines a successful Christian marriage? I guess the short answer to what constitutes a Christian marriage, a successful Christian marriage, it's a marriage that mirrors the relationship that Christ had or has with the church. So how we measure our marriage and where we're at and how successful we are, for a better term, is comparing it to the relationship that Christ has with his church, with us. And there's a lot of sort of commentary on this, and I did a lot of research on Christian authors and church elders and early church fathers and things like that. And I came across a lot of good stuff. There's a lot there, so I tried to pick what I could. There's an author called Gary Thomas. He's a Christian marriage counselor, and he's an author. He's wrote multiple books, and he says something really nice. He says, we have to stop asking of marriage what God never designed it to give: perfect happiness, conflict-free living, and idolatrous obsession. So these things are what the secular world tells us or defines as a good marriage: is perfect happiness, conflict-free living, and idolatrous obsession, all things sexual and all that intimacy and all that stuff, which is nothing wrong with it, but it's not what defines our marriages. He says, instead, we need to recognize and understand why God designed marriage: to provide partnership and intimacy, sure, yep. So that's exactly what is involved and a part of God's plan within marriage, definitely. But more importantly, the ability to grow closer to God together. The ability to grow closer to God together. So all of this stuff in society, you know, my soulmate and, you know, things like my partner completes me and all of this stuff, you know, for us as Christians, it's not what it's about. That's not what marriage is about. God designed marriage for us as a mechanism to spend eternity with him. So he designed marriage as a vehicle for us to spend eternity with him. And for us to use marriage for that purpose, for that aim, to achieve that goal that we have for our salvation, for our partner's salvation, for our family, our children's salvation. So we're using marriage as a carriage, as a vehicle to achieve this salvation. And for us as Christians, and sort of the way I look at it, for I'd say, I don't know, 98, maybe 99% of Christians, there's two vehicles we use. It's either marriage or monasticism. So all of us as Christians have an aim to get to heaven. We all want to achieve salvation and get to heaven. And for most of us, we either do it through marriage or we do it through monasticism. So for all of us here, I'm guessing we're all married, so we've all chosen marriage. So that's our vehicle to get to heaven, is marriage. It's not for anything else. It's not for happiness. It's not for wealth. It's not for, you know, to live a happy life and have all these materialistic things and to get on great and enjoy our holidays and that's what sort of we see as a successful marriage. And the point of it is to get to heaven, and we use marriage to do that. There's another priest, he writes some really good things, and I really like this saying, and I use it in every one of my talks. His name is Father Andrew Stephen Damick. I think he's either Russian or Syrian or something like that, some other Orthodox. He says, God doesn't give us the spouses we want for our happiness and comfort. God doesn't give us the spouses we want for our happiness and comfort. God gives us the spouses we need for our salvation. So he doesn't give us our spouses to keep us happy and for us to enjoy our holidays and life's good. He gives us the spouses we need for salvation. And if we look at it that way, it's a really good way to make sense of the issues we have in our marriages. And it's a really good way to look at, and it's a good perspective to have when we come across difficulties in our marriage. If we can look at it like that, and when we have problems, we stop and think, is God trying to teach me something? Not excusing our spouse's behavior or you know, their weaknesses and flaws or anything like that. But, you know, if we can change our perspective in the way we see the difficulties we have in our marriage, it could very well impact the way we go about it and the way we try and solve it and the way we process it and the impact that it has on us. So the difficulties we have, God might be using or allowing our spouse to be a certain way in order to teach us something, or because it's important for our salvation in one way or another. I'll get to a lot more of the Christian stuff in the strategies and in the way forward in sort of, you know, resolving conflict within our marriages. I'll jump to I don't know if you guys have heard of someone called John Gottman. So him and his wife, Julie, it's called the Gottman Institute out of America. Very, very active in this relationship, marriage space. He's a researcher, a lot of research, a lot of studies. He's developed this institute. It's very, very interesting. If you guys are interested, I can send some links after for you to look a bit more into this and his work. But I like one piece of his work. It's called the Four Horsemen. So he's very clearly, and after a lot of research, and he's got a very high success rate of predicting divorce. So he's, and it's quite remarkable. If you jump on his website and have a look at what he does, him and his wife in their practice, they've got, I think, over a 90% success rate in the referrals they get for marriage counseling and family therapy in predicting, and it's all documented, which marriages don't do so well and which marriages sort of have a chance to survive. And he's put it down to four main things. Obviously, there's a lot of things and there's a lot of complications and there's a spectrum, but he sort of narrowed it down to four specific things. And I thought it might be useful to go through them. And again, this is general, not to say if you have these things in your marriage that you're doomed, not at all. But it's good to be aware of them and to sort of focus on them if they are there and to see if we can resolve them. So the first one, he says, is criticism. So criticizing your partner. and not complaining and not trying to resolve an issue, but criticizing. So verbally attacking personality or character. So when we criticize like that, we're no longer talking about the issue at hand, we're talking about the person. It's no longer about the problem or about the argument. The content shifts from what it is that's annoying us to focusing on the person and the character and the personality of the other person. And if we find we're doing that, we need to be very, very careful. It's very, very destructive. And the long-term effects of always criticizing and attacking our spouses, it builds things like resentment, and it really does a lot of harm in the long term. So criticism is one of the first things he sort of identifies in his terms as a marriage killer. And I've got, just to make it clearer, I've got some, where are we? Sorry. Okay, it's not loading, sorry. I just had some examples of what criticism is. So, criticizing your partner, rather than saying what it is they did to impact you. So, you did this and it made me feel whatever, you accuse them of, being selfish. So rather than, hey, I wanted, coffee as well, you didn't make me one, to saying to them, you're selfish, you just think of yourself, you self-drinks, and you never ask me if I want anything, you're selfish, you're selfish, you're selfish. So no longer about the issue, you're attacking them and their personality personally, as an example. The second one he talks about is contempt. So, holding your partner in contempt, attacking sense of self with an intent to insult or abuse. Again, similar to criticism, but it features a lot more disrespect. It could be mocking, it could be sarcastic, it could be abusive. It's very disrespectful. So again, you're talking and you're highlighting the character and the personality and the type of person or what's inside of your spouse, and you're doing it in a way that's disrespectful and that's mockery and that is harmful, and nothing good can come from it. You're not solving a problem, you're not affecting any sort of change. It's just negative and disrespectful. So contempt, hand in hand with criticism, are two big things that Gottman identified. The third one is defensiveness. And we're talking like a level of defensiveness that is very prominent and is very frequent and is very strong. And it's, like a wall that a partner can't get past or can't get around. We're not talking low-level defensiveness. We're talking about, a person consistently and always victimizing themselves to sort of ward off any responsibility or any wrongdoing or any fault, always making excuses, always reversing the blame. And, anytime something's raised with them, they're automatically putting it on the other person or giving every excuse under the sun for whatever it is that happened, and never ever sort of stopping and thinking, okay, could I have done better? Or did I do something wrong? Or is an apology wanted? Anything like that. So that level of defensiveness and that frequency of defensiveness seems to be a big issue in marriages. The fourth one is what he calls stonewalling. So stonewalling is withdrawing to avoid conflict and convey disapproval, distance, or separation. So stonewalling is just wiping your hands. You're never solving an issue. You're never talking about an issue. You're never giving the relationship enough respect to sit down and sort through any problem or to hear any sort of anything against you, or how you're impacting your partner or anything like that. You're just disengaging. And again, we're talking about a high level where every conversation, every issue that's brought up, every time a partner comes to talk to you about something, it's always put to the side, or I'm tired, or not now, or later, or just ignoring, or the cold shoulder, or whatever it is. That level of stonewalling builds up. Things never get solved. Conflict doesn't get solved, and it builds up, and then it explodes, and it's detrimental in the long run. So they're the four: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Do we have any questions, or anyone want to jump in at this point and share anything? I tend to talk a lot, so if you guys don't stop me or jump in, I'll just waffle on for ages and ages.
I guess Rebecca or Christine, do you want to jump in with anything?
I think it all makes so much sense, and I think at some point throughout our marriages, we all go through kind of, phases where we go up and down and up and down. It's just a roller coaster ride. And we pass through some of these, but I think just hearing them and talking more about them creates that awareness, so that when you do go through that, it kind of triggers a red light, and it brings your attention to the effects of this in the long term. So you kind of start working back on it, because I believe any relationship, whether it's with your partner, at work, with your kids, you have to just always put a lot of effort in it. And you don't want to keep putting these things off. So I might also put them in the chat here too, so everybody can see them.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And you touched on something very important. I think everything we're talking about and we'll continue to talk about, it all comes down to effort. And we say marriage is hard work and marriage is not easy, and marriage is not the walk in the park that we all thought it was. It always comes back to effort and the amount of effort. None of this stuff comes naturally to us. It's not natural to be, to be able to deal with some of this stuff, or to be that humble and that, selfless, where, you don't exhibit any of these things. It's not natural to us. So a lot of this stuff, either a lot of effort on our part to not do these things, or a lot of effort on our part to deal with it if we're facing this stuff in our marriages. And it all comes down to effort. And without that effort and really, really working hard at this stuff, this is where we sort of come across issues. And I say it again in most of my talks, you guys have heard me talk before, you'll hear me say this. From my experience as well, my own marriage and in the work that I do, I think we put the least amount of effort into our marriages. From my perspective and sort of what I've seen in my own experience, if you look at all the aspects of our lives, we work and we serve, and we go to church and we raise kids, and we're homemakers, we keep our homes, we vacuum, we clean, we mow the lawn, we get promotions, we do business, we're successful, we go education, we learn, we do wagib, we go visit our parents who are elderly, and we go to visit those in hospital and take, things to the people that need it. We serve Sunday school, whatever. We put so much effort into everything we do in our lives. We want to succeed, we want to do well, we want to impress, and we want to raise children well. And for some reason, I think we're exhausted after all this effort we place everywhere else, that when it comes to our marriages, it's whatever's left over. If anything's left over, we'll sort of allocate it to our marriages and our relationships.
I think it's interesting what you said, Kiro. Sorry, I think it's interesting. I think when we shift our focus and think, like, how you said, we're not married to be happy and comfortable and this perfect happiness, where actually marriage gets us to salvation, and it might be a trial and the tribulation, and it works on that. I think that if we shift that focus, I think that's quite confronting and a good point to focus on before we even begin. It's not just about finding that perfect happiness and, he should be making me happy, or she should be making me really happy. Actually, this person's been put in my life to get me to salvation, and it won't be happiness and bliss at all times.
100%. And if we look at it that way, then we have to ask ourselves, what's the point of all this other stuff? If we agree that marriage is our vehicle to our salvation and our partner's salvation and our children's salvation, and that's our starting point, we start there. If we're not focusing on that, putting in effort in that, what's the point then of us investing our time and effort and resources into all this other stuff if the most important one for our salvation, we're letting it go? So if our marriages and our relationships and everything that happens within our home is not up to scratch and is not pushing us along that road to our salvation, what's the point of serving? What's the point of being a millionaire? What's the point of helping others? What's the point of all this other stuff? If, and to be fair as well, our marriages and our relationships impact everything else. If I'm not good with my wife, I'm not having a good day. If I have an argument or a fight with my wife and I go to work, I'm not going to perform. It's going to be hanging over my head. I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be whatever. Same thing with our service. Same thing with our relationships with other people, raising our children. If you've got marital problems, you don't have the emotional capacity to raise your kids well and to be emotionally available for them and to discipline appropriately and to not lose your cool, blah, blah, blah. So if we're married, and that's obviously our primary relationship, that impacts every other aspect of our life. So from a priority perspective, I think, and you're right, Meret, we need to shift the priority and sort of focus on our marriages and our relationships and put effort and resources into that, so everything else, falls into place or is easier to attend to.
Kira, do you mind if I ask a question?
Please.
In your experience, do you think that's a cultural thing, a religious thing, or that's just a human thing that we don't prioritize our marriages and it falls under a list of other to-dos in your experience?
Look, my experience is quite limited, but in my experience, I think it's a bit of everything. I think as human beings, we get complacent naturally. And I think we take things for granted. And as human beings, if that's a default or a weakness in a lot of humans, then it makes sense that the first thing that we would take for granted and get complacent in is our relationships. It's always there. We wake up next to them, we go to bed next to them, we come home next to them, we travel with them, we do everything with them. We take it for granted. So from a human perspective, I think that's part of it. I think from a spiritual perspective, and Abuna, please jump in. I think, there is a big priority on service, and there is a big priority on helping, and it's a very Christian thing to do, to give and to serve and to help those in need and to bring people closer to Christ and to evangelize and to do all this stuff. And our religion, very beautifully preaches a lot of this stuff, and so it should. And I think sometimes as devout Christians and as wanting to be Christian, we get lost in that. We prioritize that, where we become sometimes maybe unbalanced. So it's, and it's not a matter of neglecting our marriages and doing all this other stuff. I think it's just sometimes unbalanced, where we don't give it the right amount of time and priority compared to everything else. So from a spiritual perspective, maybe we need to look at sometimes our priorities in regards to how we apply ourselves. So I think it's a bit of everything.
Sorry, before we move on, we've just got a question here. Maybe Abuna, you can give us some insight into this one as well. So we've got a question that says, but is that not contradictory to when St. Paul says, get married if you cannot control yourself? But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion.
What's Abuna?
Thanks, Maggie, for a lovely question. I was very much enjoying listening, being in the background. Look, it is a tough verse, and I think I'll just a few thoughts to be conscious of. That verse appears in 1 Corinthians, in which St. Paul was addressing a number of problems in the early church. And one of the big problems there was sexual immorality, and he goes so far to say, as he says, the sexual immorality that's happening in the church is even worse than is happening outside the church. So it was quite a dire situation. And so I'll read actually the whole passage in 1 Corinthians 7. It says, concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourself to fasting and prayer, and come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. For I wish that all men were even as I myself, but each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good to them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So that verse, we have to remember it in the overall context of St. Paul's situation, writing to a church where sexual immorality was rife, but also within the context of what he said in that particular passage. So he's saying, like, I wish everyone is like me and not married and serving God full time. And I think we all know that the reality is an unmarried person has a lot more time to serve God than a married person, right? That's just a fact. So he says, I wish that could be the fact, and we just pray and read and do all of these things. But each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and one in that. So he's saying, so if you're a Christian and you're motivated to do the right thing in the eyes of God, and you hear this, you're like, all right, St. Paul, I'm psyched. I'm not going to get married. That's it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to serve God like you. But then he says, all right, calm down for a second. Each one has his own gift from God, one in this and one in that. What he is saying, he's warning the people, he's qualifying what his statement with, this is not for everybody. And then he goes on to say, to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them to remain even as I am, but if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. It is better to marry than to burn with passion. So it's a fact that the unmarried allows a lot more opportunity to serve God and to be focused and not to deal with the mundane, everyday things that we as married people have to do. But it's not for everybody. I hope that's helpful, and I'm sure, Maggie, that you're not completely satisfied, so please push me.
It's just and I joined late, so I apologize if I've missed maybe stuff that would have answered this question. But because we're actually teaching this topic to our Year 12s at the moment, so we keep telling them this thing, you know, like marriage is an opportunity, it's a spiritual partnership to be able to take each other to heaven. But at the end of the day, even looking at St. Paul, and I know you're telling me to look at it in context, but even in that context, we get we got a lot of the marriage ceremony verses that are said at the ceremony from St. Paul. And that means that the church actually prizes what he says, irrespective of the context of what he was saying. So it's really hard to, I suppose, try and shift our focus as that the primary goal of marriage is to take each other to heaven, when St. Paul himself is telling us that, you know, it is better to actually be like me. But if you can't control yourself, because in saying that, he inherently is saying that marriage, one of its primary goals is to subdue carnal lusts.
Well, yes, and that's true, Maggie, and that's very important to get us to heaven. It's so important. I don't see those two things as contradictory. And I think another important thing is that although we're just generally speaking about the Bible, we should never look at the context and then try to explain it away and say, oh no, that doesn't apply to our situation, just as an overarching statement. But in this particular situation, I don't believe that that they are contradictory. So St. Paul wants everyone to get to heaven. And he says, yeah, look, if you're unmarried, that's one way to get to heaven. And if you are married, then that's also a way to get to heaven, because you're not going to be held, you know, to ransom by physical urges which are overwhelming. I don't see them as contradictory.
Thanks, Munak. It's really, really fair point what you said about, well, we're going to get to heaven if we can control this part. I think that's the answer. That's actually very good. Thank you, Abuna.
Oh, I'm not sure I've been.
Okay, if you've just joined us, we've got Kiro Saleeb. So we've just got a few people join us now. We've got Kiro Saleeb talking about marriage and bridging the gap. He's just discussed the 4 killers of a healthy marriage, which was criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And we'll now be moving on to the strategies. Kiro, please.
Thank you, Abuna, for that. I'm going to make sure you attend all my talks as a safety net for the hard questions. All right, so four strategies, and they're not so much strategies, they are, but they're also concepts and strategies all merged together, but things that we need and ways we need to sort of act, right? The first one, and look, this is all stock standard and nothing here is going to surprise you, and you've heard this all a million times before, but you know, I guess it's the truth of the matter and it's fact of the matter, and it's that simple and it's that black and white as to what we need to have good Christian marriages. The first one is God. So if we're defining marriage as a Christian marriage, without God, we've got buckleys. We've got buckleys of having a successful marriage if God is not in that marriage and is not featuring in that marriage and is not a cornerstone of that marriage. And it's that black and white. For two human beings, completely different human beings, raised differently, you know, made up differently, different experiences, different upbringings, different everything, to come together, you know, and to expect that to be a smooth process and an everlasting process and one without conflict is no chance. It's not going to happen, and it doesn't exist. No matter how well you think people are married and how well they present, it's impossible. Our weaknesses, our flaws, and everything that makes us up, it's inevitable that we're going to have difficulties. Without God involved, we've got very, very little chance. Our human nature is corrupted. So from inside of us and innately in us and what we can produce on our own, it's not much. It's quite pathetic. So for how hard marriage is and what it takes to have a good Christian marriage, God is he's a very, very important part of that. And I'm sure you guys here, I'll share this screen, and I'm certain you've all seen it. There's two parts to it. So this slide, can you guys all see it? Sorry. Can you see that slide? So, and I'm sure you've all come across it. And it's a very simple equation. You've got the husband and you've got the wife, and the relationship between them, yep, down the bottom, the arrow, it's very important and it's beautiful and it's nice. But the third party obviously is God. The second slide, and this is one probably not as prevalent as much shown as the first one. The concept here is the closer you get to God, the closer you'll get to your partner. So we don't have what it takes, unfortunately, and I don't mean to sound morbid, and I wholeheartedly believe this, we don't have what it takes to have good Christian successful marriages. We don't have that level of unconditional love. We don't have that level of humility. We don't, and if we do, it's God-given. It's not coming from us. If we do have that, and for those of us that have good Christian marriages and God is the cornerstone and all that, again, that's the case because it's coming from Him. These virtues and these, this goodness that we need to make the marriages work and that we need to extend to the other person, we don't have that in us innately as human beings. So we don't have it. Where do we go to get it? There's nowhere else to go except to God. And it's the only way to make that work. And it's the only way for us to possess these virtues that we need to make marriage work. So that's that. The second one, and these all, and you're going to see a theme here, and you're all closely linked, and you will notice as we go on, you'll notice a theme here, and it's sort of all pointing to one thing, and I'll try and wrap it up in the end to sort of consolidate all this. The second one is the concept of love. And again, love, yeah, we love our partners, yeah, you need love for a good marriage, love, and we talk about love. But again, like we do with marriage, the concept of marriage, yeah, marriage, husband and wife together, beautiful, yep. But digging deeper into what it is that we're talking about when we say love, or the love between a husband and wife, what are we talking about? What do we mean by love? So it's not, again, the secular term and the way we understand it as humans or in this society. It's not an infatuation with the other person, an obsession with the other person. It's not because of, we have love because of the characteristics and it being dependent on the other person. She's beautiful and she's kind, she's honest. Even as Christians, a lot of us say, oh, because, she loves the Lord, or because he's a good Christian, he loves the Lord, that's why I love him. That's habit. Like all of this stuff, that's great. Alf Mabruk to them. They have all these things, good on them. That's got nothing to do with you. And it's not, you're not bringing anything to the table in regards to all these nice things about the other person. So when we're talking about love, it all comes down to one thing. And that thing is self-sacrifice and death to ourselves. If we're talking about love and the Christian understanding of love, it's not all this other noise. It comes down to sacrificing ourselves. So in the context of a marriage and the love within a marriage towards our spouse, it comes down to sacrificing ourselves and death to ourselves. And that's evident by the Christian definition of love. We claim to love God. We all do, and as Christians, we love God. What does that mean, though? When we say we love God, what does it mean? What are we actually doing? We're sacrificing ourselves for God. We're going without for God. We're being persecuted for God. We're being hard done by for God. We're going without meat and chicken and buftek and all this hectic stuff because we love God and we're sacrificing for him. We're putting aside our desires and our wants and our priorities, and we're denying ourselves for Christ because we're claiming to love Christ. The martyrs, they loved God. What did they do? They died. They sacrificed themselves. They gave their life up for the one that they loved. Christ loved us. What did he do? He died. He got killed. We love our kids. We all have kids. We love them. Do you love your kids? Yeah, I love my kids. What does that mean? We sacrifice for our kids. We go without. We put ourselves out. We're exhausted. We jump through hoops. We do all sorts of things for our kids because we love them. You hear stories of, siblings loving their sibling enough to like give them kidneys and donate, something to them, or, they're taking a part of themselves and giving it to someone else. So there's always an element of sacrifice, self-sacrifice, and denying of oneself, showing and portraying this kind of love. And that's the kind of love we have to aspire to in our marriages. And how do we love our spouses? And these are questions we need to ask ourselves. How do we love our spouses? What do we sacrifice for our spouses to show this love? It's not compliments and you look beautiful and, supportive and all of this. That comes with it. That's great. But, it goes deeper than that. Love is not an emotion. So, and again, maybe contrary to popular belief, it's not an emotion. You can have emotional feelings of love and of fondness, but love itself, it's not an emotion. The timing as well, if we do have this love, or at times we do have this love, the timing as well is very, very important. When do we show this love? Do we show this love when our partners are being nice to us and accommodating us and, or we're being intimate, or, we're on a family holiday? Or do we show this love when we're arguing, or when we're fighting, or when we're being hard done by, or when they're behaving in a way that's, not the best? So when we show this love and how we show this love is very important. And then that's whether, that determines whether it features in our marriage or not. And like we said before, this is the biblical love. So the love that we're talking about in a Christian marriage is the biblical love that we know and that we learn from the Bible. And the example, obviously, of Christ, the ultimate example. So that's the second one. So we've got God, we got love. Sorry, did someone have a question?
Yeah, Mary has a question.
Yeah, I have a question actually about that takes me by surprise, the self-sacrificing one. It doesn't take me by surprise, so I'll say that again. When you say to someone, why do you love me? I don't think I've ever heard someone say, because you're self-sacrificing. I've never heard that, like you said, it's contrary to anything contemporary or Western per se. So I guess this is probably the wrong context, but if you were giving this marriage talk to engaged couples or people who are yet to find a spouse, how do you like action that in their search of a partner to keep that in mind? Like, that's really difficult, I think, to observe it back then, and then that's really difficult to observe. Like, how do you action that in reality?
Yeah, I think, and it's look, I think this stuff also like builds as we go on with our relationships, and as we stay married, and the more we're married, and it develops and it grows, and again with God involved, it builds. Loving things about the other person, of course, you love that they're kind, and you love that they love the Lord and they're good servants, and you love all these things about them 100%, and that's required. If you don't have that, you got no chance. Like the marriage, if you don't have that kind of love, that definition of love, or that type of love towards the other person, then it's not going to work. So that's a prerequisite. It's very important to have that. But I'm saying there's a lot more to it than that. When you're married and when you're living with this person and you've got issues and you've got problems, their prettiness is not going to keep the marriage going. Their love for God and how much they're at church serving, that could be a problem for you, not something that you adore and you love about them. If they're always outside feeding the poor and they're neglecting their home, you're going to have a problem as a spouse. So that kind of love is great and has its place and it's important, but it's not the complete picture and it's not the complete definition. And when push comes to shove, and we talk in the context of marital conflict, when conflict starts to show its head, that stuff's going to go down the ladder. You're not going to notice how pretty your partner is when you don't like them very much because of the way you think they're acting towards you and you're very angry with them. So I think that's a part of it, and that's needed and it has its place. But this kind of love that we're talking about, I think, is a lot deeper. And again, like my perspective and from what I read, that type of true love needs to have an element of self-sacrifice. And the examples in the Bible and this kind of love that we're talking about from Christ, it was never portrayed in a way that didn't have that element of self-sacrifice and denial. it featured in any time we're talking about this kind of love, that stands out and that's featured. And I think that's the type of love we have to have within our marriages to have good Christian marriages. I don't know if that answers your question. If it doesn't, Abuna, please jump in and save me again.
Mary looks happy, Kiro.
Okay. So the third one, again, very intertwined, very linked, selflessness. So the concept of selflessness, and it's hand in hand with love and with God. You decide to get married, so you decide to not become a monk, and you're not going to choose monasticism or non-monasticism to enter the kingdom of heaven. You're going to choose marriage. You make that decision. You're making the decision to, feature and put on display selflessness. It's part and parcel. So you're no longer living for yourself. You choose to get married, you're not living for yourself. And it's sort of that black and white. It's definitely not easy, and it's very hard to achieve, but it's so important. It's so important to acknowledge that that's what you've signed up for. You've signed up to start embarking on to become a selfless human being when you decide to get married. And selflessness, in regards to letting go of things, if we're talking conflict resolution, selflessness in accepting hurt, being wronged, things like foregoing justice, not selflessness like, you can have the last chicken, or, you want to go here for dinner. Yeah, let's go there. I don't really care. A lot deeper. You're being harmed, or you're being hard done by, or you're being wronged, and you're showing humility and selflessness to the point where it's having a positive impact on your marriage, and you're evading and you're, dodging conflict. That's the kind of selflessness we're talking about. Accepting hurt, being wronged, foregoing justice, sacrificing for the sake of your partner, going without, getting rid of your pride, and not taking a hit for the sake of peace, for the sake of forgiveness, for the sake of not having conflict within your marriage. And again, it's very, very closely linked to what we were discussing before. But that's the level of selflessness I think we need to exhibit in our marriages. And the fourth one is compromise. Again, all within the same theme, compromising, giving and taking. Part of being selfless, part of showing love to your partner, part of God being in the midst of your marriage, compromising with your partner, giving and taking, not just taking, but giving and taking. Having a balance in regards to your needs and what you want, and your partner's needs and what they want. Talking and strategies like communication and talking and explaining about what it is you want and why you want it. Things like listening and active listening while your partner's telling you, as opposed to a lot of the time I find in marriages and in conflict, when the other person's talking, the person's not listening, they're thinking about their position, or they're thinking about what they're going to say next, or they're thinking about how they're hard done by, or their response. So strategies like communicating effectively, strategies like active listening and understanding the position of your partner makes it easier and puts you in a better place to be able to compromise. Compromising is not easy. So doing things in a way where it makes it easier for you to implement some of this stuff, reflecting, thinking back, if you've had it your way the last few times and you recall this and that, or you recall your partner compromising or them letting go of certain things, and you reflect back, and then you use that to make it easier for yourself to be able to do some of this stuff. Strategies like empathizing, showing empathy, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. I know what I want. I know my head. I know how I'm built. I know my position. I'm very clear on that. I'm well versed. I get it. But what about them? They're different to me. What if they're seeing it differently? What if they're impacting differently? What if their reasons for whatever it is that they want, or the position they have, or the perspective they have is different to mine? So, showing that kind of empathy, again, it makes it easier for you to be able to utilize this stuff and implement this stuff, things like compromise and things like that. All of this stuff. So we agree having God in our marriages, showing love and the correct type of love, and understanding the complete picture of what love looks like. Things like selflessness, attaching to that picture of love, things like selflessness and being able to compromise and communicate with our partners. From a Christian perspective, this is all biblical. And there's two verses here to support sort of everything we're talking about. And you all know these, and we hear it at every wedding and when we read the Bible. So in Ephesians, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. And again, this verse, you know, there seems always a lot of talk about the instruction given to husbands and wives. And I think it ties nicely with what we're saying. The command for husbands is to love your wives. Love your wives means die for your wives. It's that simple. As Christ loved the church, Christ died for the church. He didn't, you know, just put himself out for the church or just accommodate the church or just make time for the church. Christ died for the church. And the command is very simple. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And if that's the example we follow as husbands, we're called to die, to lay our lives down, to lay our pride down, to lay our wants and needs and desires down, to show that level of selflessness. That's what we're commanded to do, because that's what Christ did for the church. And equally for wives to love and to submit and to respect their husbands. And again, you know, a lot of the time, you know, it's always brought up that wives are called to submit to their husbands, and what about the husbands? And I think from this verse and the interpretation of it, the command is somewhat higher level for the husband than it is for the wife. The wife is called to submit, the husband's called to die. And if a husband, you know, is leading the family in that way and is Christ-like within the marriage and as a father and as a husband, then there's no reason why the wife can't submit to the husband. If it's a Christian marriage and if all this stuff we're talking about is present within the marriage, then the equation's awesome. It fits. It's fantastic. The husband leads and the husband is like Christ and the husband sacrifices and the husband puts himself out to make sure his family is taken care of and is, you know, on their way to salvation and he's doing his job right as he's commanded. Then it should be easy and good for the wife to submit and to respect the husband. It works. The second verse, Deuteronomy, so it says, when a man has taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war or be charged with any business. He shall be free at home 1 year and bring happiness to his wife whom he has taken. Again, a command to the husband. We're not to go out and work and do business and go to war. We chose to get married. We're prioritizing our wife and our home and our families to bring them happiness and to bring them salvation and to lead them to salvation, essentially, and prioritize that and put ourselves aside for that. All of these things, so sort of bringing it to sort of putting this, like, I guess I want to put forward a perspective or a way for us to look at this differently, perhaps, if we haven't been looking at it like this. That everything we've discussed and the theme, I think, needs to shift to me in the marriage, shift the focus from the other person to myself. So if we want to start having better marriages and we want to start having Christian marriages, again, from my experience and from what I read and from what I come across, and again, in my own experience, I think the focus, when we're talking about conflict, the focus always seems to be on the other person. We're always looking to the other person. And it's very clear in our heads where the other person is going wrong and where the weaknesses are and where the flaws are and where the contribution is from the other person in regards to the conflict in our marriages and what's going wrong in our marriages. And it's not so clear when it comes to us, or it's not so evident, or it's not in the forefront of our minds when it comes to us. So all of this that we're talking about, leading to the point of, you want a better marriage, start focusing on you, shift it, start with you, not exempting the other person or putting up with or allowing or just turning a blind eye. It's very hard to do it. I'm not suggesting we do that. All I'm suggesting is we shift the focus and we shift the starting point. If we can start with ourselves first, we can start there and we can pay some attention to that and we can put some effort into that and some resources into that and effect some sort of change in that area first, then at least we're a bit more justified when we come to complain or focus on the other person. Things, and I hear it a lot, people think the solution to their problems, or they can have a better marriage if only my spouse will change this, or my biggest pet peeve is this. And it's just unfortunate that they do this. If they can just stop this or this way about them, or, this type of personality or this type of disrespect that they always show, whatever it is, if they can just change that, things will be a lot better. He or she makes me behave that way. I know it's not okay and it's not right, but they make me behave the way, they bring that out of me, they bring the worst out of me, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of the time, when we talk about marital conflict, or I work with couples, in a marriage counseling space, the focus more times than not seems to be on the other person. And I think part of the answer is shifting that. Let's start with ourselves. And it ties into everything we're talking about. It ties into that selfless love, ties into selflessness, it ties into compromise, and it ties into a Christ-like way of doing things and behaving, within our marriages. Even if your partner doesn't change, so if we have marital problems or conflict in our marriages, and we've got weaknesses and our partners have weaknesses, even if those weaknesses in our partner don't change, and if they don't get better, and if they don't improve, and we're still faced with the same challenges our partners throw at us every day, or they increase, God forbid, as time goes on, even if that's the case, you can still change yourself and effect change within that marriage and have a better marriage. It's possible. So if your partner, for some reason, isn't changing or can't change in their weaknesses and flaws and the negativity they're bringing to the marriage, you can increase your capacity. You can increase your capacity. You can increase your prayers. You can increase your virtues. You can increase your tolerance. You can increase your long suffering. You can increase your forgiveness levels. You can still do so much to change the dynamic within your marriage if you shift the focus to yourself rather than your partner. And again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that they can do what they want, and if you make all the changes and then you'll have a good marriage. That gets exhausting. Definitely, if one person is doing all the hard work and the other person is just being themselves, a lot of the time there's issues. So I'm not suggesting that's the magic answer. I'm just saying it's a great start. Or if we have been focusing on the other person, then maybe we should try changing that focus and focusing on ourselves first and dealing with that first, or at least effecting some change there first before we focus on the other person. There was a sermon, and he put it nicely, and obviously it's biblical, the log in your own eye compared to the speck in your brother's. And Abuna Matan Maskin was giving a sermon, and obviously he put it a lot better than the way I'm going to put it. I'm sure I'm going to butcher it for him. But he was saying, if we reach that level, or if we can, really focus on ourselves, and our perspective and our lens is really focused on us, if we can get to that level, we won't even notice what the other person's doing. Not we'll notice it, but we'll just deal with it, or we'll accept it, or we'll have the strategy and the virtues to process it and deal with it. He's saying we won't even notice. If we're so focused on ourselves, if someone asks us what's wrong with the other person, we couldn't tell them, wouldn't have a clue. We've got no idea, because we're so focused on ourselves, and it's so blinding to us, our shortcomings in the marriage, our weakness in our marriage, the negativity we bring to the marriage, even if it's a little bit, even if we feel we're bringing a little bit of negativity and they're bringing a lot, even if it's 98%, 2%. If we start with that 2% and we focus on that 2%, then, God willing, things will change and things should get better, and conflict should and could be resolved a lot easier and a lot better in the long run if we make that shift. Saying, and this I'll wrap up because I've been blabbing for a bit, but the last bit I want to share with you. So St. John Chrysostom wrote, and he's obviously written a lot, and he writes a lot of nice things about marriage and relationships, but this really stood out for me preparing this talk. So he says, the love of husband and wife is the force that welds society together. Men will take up arms and even sacrifice their lives for the sake of this love. Because when harmony prevails, the children are raised well, the household is kept in order, and neighbors, friends, and relatives praise the result. So he's talking about when we achieve this kind of Christian marriage, the impact that it has on our society, the impact that it has on the world around us and the people around us. He then goes on to say, And what if my wife refuses to obey me? A husband will ask. Never mind. Your obligation is to love her, do your duty. Even when we don't receive our due from others, we must do our duty. Even when we don't receive our due from others, we must do our duty. If a spouse doesn't obey God's law, you are not excused. A wife should respect her husband even when he shows her no love. And a husband should love his wife even when she shows him no respect. Then they will both be found to lack nothing, since each has fulfilled the commandment given to him. So St. John Chrysostom saying, don't worry about the other person. If they're not obeying God, that's their problem. He'll deal with them. They have to answer to that. Just because they're not doing their job, that doesn't mean that you're excused from doing yours. We're married, and God has given me a commandment as the husband, and God has given my wife the commandment as a wife. My responsibility is to understand that commandment, to really understand that commandment, and to make sure that every day within my marriage, I'm doing that to the best of my ability. And when I'm not, I go to him to help me do that. I shouldn't be worried and focused on the other party not doing their job or not listening to God or not obeying that commitment. That's their problem. And I really like the way St. John Chrysostom put it. It's very fact of the matter, and it's very blunt. A wife should respect the husband even when he shows her no love. A husband should love his wife even when she shows him no respect. They'll both be found to lack nothing. If they both do their jobs, they'll be found to lack nothing, since each has fulfilled the commandment given to them.
Kiro, can we jump in with a question?
Please.
Okay, we've just got an anonymous question saying, assuming someone can reach that level of self-sacrifice, how can they maintain their confidence in themselves, work, etc., for either the husband or the wife?
So someone can reach that level of self-sacrifice, how can they maintain their confidence? From my perspective, if you've achieved that level of self-sacrifice, and we're talking the Christian self-sacrifice and what we've just discussed and what we've heard and what we've read, I don't think that will in any way negatively impact confidence or self-esteem or someone's ability to, work or perform or anything like that. The opposite. I think if we can achieve that level of self-sacrifice, I'm not saying, put yourself down. I'm not saying be a doormat and be walked all over and have no confidence and no self-esteem and be a maltasha. I'm not saying to do that within your marriages. I'm saying if you can achieve that level of godly, Christ-like self-sacrifice, you know your value, you know your worth, you know you're a Christian, you know you're a child of God, you know that you're doing this and you're self-sacrificing, not because you're a doormat, but because you're being instructed to by God for the sake of love and for the sake of peace and for the sake of salvation and for the sake of long-suffering and forgiveness. That's like your confidence should be through the roof. Your godly confidence and your esteem and your understanding and your level of virtue should skyrocket if you can achieve that level of self-sacrifice.
But do you think that takes into account as well, like the secular idea of marriage? I think that is something that we will obviously want to balance as well. As much as we're self-sacrificing and we're fulfilling our godly duties, a part of every spouse wants to feel that love reciprocated, wants to feel that, things are, both ways, that the other partner is trying and giving back to the marriage.
Definitely. And I think that's where other strategies and other sort of components come in. If you're doing your godly duty and if you're conducting yourself in your marriage the way God has instructed you to, and you're doing that, and you're, for the most part, sort of in a way like you're blame-free and you're doing your part, you're in a position to communicate and to sort of put that on the table and to discuss the issues and to respectfully criticize or critique or raise issues or explain to your partner the impact they're having on you and the impact they're having on the marriage. And like whatever concerns you have, you're able to share and you're able to discuss in order to achieve an outcome and in order to hopefully, God willing, effect some sort of change on their end. So I'm not saying as well, you do all this stuff and you just cop it and knackered, but you're okay with it because you're self-sacrificing and this is your key now and this is the way you're going to live your life. If you can first achieve these things, your second step then in the marriage is to effectively, respectfully communicate and sort through problems and resolve conflict. It doesn't just end there. Self-sacrifice, I've done it, I've achieved it, I'm good, and now this is, I'm going to be good moving forward. No, there's a lot more to it. And, you know, you embark on that journey to rectify things in your marriage, to communicate, to explain to your husband or the wife the impact that they're having on you, blah, 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 and you resolve conflict moving forward. But I'm just suggesting as a starting point, let's focus on that first. If we're talking, you know, we want to achieve 100%, this could be 50, 60, 70%. Let's start there. Let's work on this. Let's try and get to that level. If we're there, or if we're not going to get there, but if we effect enough change in that area, or we're well on our way, or we've, you know, obtained a lot of this stuff from God and we're using it in our marriage and it is making a difference and things are getting better, great. Then we can start to focus on the other 30 and 40%, whether that's with the other person, whether that's some sort of, you know, talking to someone else, marriage counseling to get some support for the remainder, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, whatever else you feel needs to, you know, to be worked on your marriage. But I'm just suggesting if we can change the starting point and change the focus, it could make the biggest difference in our marriages.
Rebecca, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so just a question, Kira, on that. When do you find in your experience as a therapist that when you see one partner successfully try to work on themselves and change, that actually positively impacts their partner to change as well? Because I would hope that would be the case, but have you seen that in your practice?
100%, I've seen that, and it makes sense. You know, if a couple come to me with marital issues and there's been a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, whatever, of issues and conflict and whatever, and then, you know, or even on their own journey, they don't have to come to a counselor, but if someone's experienced this and then they purposely and consciously start to change the focus and shift the focus and work on themselves and start to, you know, become self-sacrificial, start to, you know, conduct themselves in a way that God has instructed them to in their marriage, then it's very noticeable. And whatever they were doing wrong, or whatever their shortcomings or their flaws were, if they're starting to be more Christ-like, that stuff decreases and decreases and decreases. So at least whatever they were contributing, the negativity they were contributing to the marriage, when they embark on this journey, that automatically decreases. You can't be Christ-like or achieve being Christ-like or obtain the virtues of Christ and still be contributing negativity and horrible things and taking, you know, putting your marriage down the burglar. It's not possible. So the more you become Christ-like, the more positive impact you're going to have on your marriage, the less issues your partner's going to have with you, because your faults are lessening, because you're decreasing yourself, you're increasing him. If you're becoming more Christ-like, it's impossible for that to not change, you know, along the road, for that to not change and get better. So 100%, when someone, you know, changes like that, or changes the focus and starts embarking on that journey, it's very evident. And I've seen it, and the other person a lot of the time will vouch for that as well. And as you see sessions, you know, move forward and 5, 10, 15 sessions in, and you get that person to reflect, yeah, their complaints are less. Or when you ask them, what have you noticed? They'll tell you exactly, they used to be like this, they used to be like this isn't happening anymore, I can't even remember the last time, you know, this, blah, blah, blah. It's very, very evident, 100%. And I think then, if that's the case, it makes it easier then for the other person to change. It's welcoming. It provides a platform for the other person to then start maybe working on them. If they're seeing that change in you, or they're seeing the effort you put in, or they're seeing how you've done a 180 in something, it's welcoming for them to bring more positivity to the marriage, or to, you know, to change themselves.
I just think that's important. And no, sorry, one last thing for people to hear, that if I in fact change for myself and make all that effort, that will actually positively impact change in my partner. Because some people might be thinking to themselves, I'm going to make all these changes, and what if that actually doesn't change them? But actually what you're saying is it most likely will. And maybe that's the most effective way of doing that.
I was just going to say that it's biblical. In 1 Peter chapter 3, we read about this exact conversation. Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives.
Brilliant. Spot on. So I should have gone to that. That would have saved the 10-minute explanation that I gave. I've got here, my last slide is just a few tips. I'll go through them very quickly. First one is active listening. And I think for a lot of us, we don't do that well. Active listening, actually listen and understand and process what the other person's saying, rather than just thinking of your position or your rebuttal. And again, it's selflessness, it's sacrifices, everything we've been discussing. Actively listen to what your partner's saying. And this concept of acknowledging your partner, not agreeing with your partner, acknowledging your partner. And there's a big difference. And it goes a long way. So you don't have to agree with them. You can not understand where they're coming from at all, or you can't possibly comprehend how they came to that conclusion or how that impacted them. You can think they're crazy for all I care. It doesn't matter. You can completely disagree with them as much as you want, but you need to acknowledge that this is their perspective, or this is their point of view, or this is how it made them feel. Even if you don't understand how, it doesn't matter. You've married this person. You claim to love this person. They're telling you this is how they feel. This is the impact that it's having on them. You have to acknowledge that. You don't have to agree, but you have to acknowledge it. Be humble. We've discussed humility, selflessness. So be humble. You're not perfect. You sin differently than your partner, or your flaws are different, or your weaknesses are different to your partner, but they're still there. So humility is a big part of it. No, that's not a question. Okay. The fourth one is, and this is an important one, let God speak for you. Silence. So a lot of the time, what we call a first response, so from a psychological and emotional perspective as humans, whatever's inside us, that's usually what's going to come out first. If we're angry and we respond or we talk, anger is probably going to come out. If we're hurt, hurt is going to come out. If we're, whatever it is that we're feeling, whatever emotional, whatever it is that we're feeling inside, or whatever is inside of us, it's likely to come out if we engage or if we talk. So if it's negative inside us, then negative will come out. So this concept of the first response, let God speak for you, or take some time out, or say a quick arrow prayer, or don't be so quick to talk. Give yourself 5 or 10 seconds and give God the opportunity to come in, and let it be a godly response as opposed to a human response, as much as you can, just as a strategy. Just be conscious of whatever's inside for us. We've got no control over it. It's probably going to come out. So if we can control just those first 5, 10, 15 seconds and give God the opportunity, or call God on to speak for us, or to influence what we're going to say or what we're going to do, it makes a big difference. Let things go. So I put here plenty of opportunity to fight. So within our marriages, I'm sure you'll experience, we're going to fight, we're going to argue, we're going to punch on, we're going to disagree, and we're going to act in, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity. We're married to these people for 50, 60, 70 years, God willing. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. So the concept of picking your battles or letting things go. Yes, this is annoying, but you know what? In the scheme of things, whatever, let it go. I'll save my fight for the next big thing that I'm not going to let go, and we'll have it out. And I mean that, like, lightheartedly. But let things go. Pick your battles. Yeah. There's going to be so much that comes to us within our marriages, and we can't have out every single thing that annoys us and every single thing that impacts us. We need to let things go. We need to be selective. Reflection is a big part, and again ties into everything we're saying. Reflect on yourself. We're so quick to point out the issues in the other person, but what about us? Is there something we could have done better? Maybe we didn't do anything wrong. Maybe we didn't even do anything wrong, but could we have done something better to get a better outcome? Possibly. We won't know if we don't reflect. I've put in here, and it's a very simple concept. What would Jesus do? WWJD, and I think it's such a simple concept, and I don't think enough of us use it enough. And I think we should be using it more. If we ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? What would he say? How would he respond? And we answer that in our heads, or we know what the answer to that will be, it puts us in a better position to then be like that. If we know how Jesus would respond, or if we know what Jesus would say or do in this situation, then we've got a better chance of doing that if we stop to reflect on that first. It's very simple. It's not hard. It's hard to do, but it's not hard to stop and think, what would Jesus do? This is what he'd do. Okay, I'm going to try and do that. If we can stop ourselves and do that, it can be very, very powerful. That's me. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiro. So we're going to stop recording now so that if you would like and feel more comfortable to show your face and ask questions directly to Kiro,